Yeah. Huh. Well, it's definitely
It depends. It really depends on the growth of our business and the capital we retain as a result of our growth to finance that project.
Yeah.
That's a big part of it.
Is the wine industry and the growth, is it cyclical? You know, is it dependent on right now? Some parts of the United States are, the economy is softening.
Well, in the wine industry, there's essentially a manic depressive cycle.
Uh-huh.
And this manic depressive cycle occurs in many other kinds of agriculture and in business. People are happier than they should be when they're happy, and they're sadder than they should be when they're sad.
Uh-huh.
And as a consequence, it drives the investing behavior. So people, right now, we're on the top of the bubble. We're top of the manic
Still
bubble.
at the top right now.
Of the manic bubble, yes.
Uh-huh.
People are.
So there's a little bit of a lag from,
Yes, there always is. But they're happier than they should be. They think that this will never end, and so there's a lot of capacity that's being invested in vineyards and winery capacity in Oregon, especially vineyard capacity. And that's not just true in Oregon, but that's true elsewhere.
Uh-huh.
And especially on varietal sensitive demand areas like Pinot Noir.
Uh-huh.
There's tremendous investment occurring there. So then that produces oversupply, and then that creates a depressive cycle.
Uh-huh.
Where prices fall and there's overproduction and oversupply, and then we go back around again. And this cycle, strangely, works at the same time frame as vines mature. So the cycle runs around 7 to 10 years. As capacity matures and comes online and then becomes excessive and so on.
Well, and so what's the relationship between the vineyard depressive, excessive cycle and say the stock market and real estate prices?
Same thing.
A bit like it's
same principles.
Like
same principles at work. Just different timing.
So and the time frame is what, like a lag of 6 months, a year?
Oh well, we're going to see. The economy will go into a downturn, which will create reductions in demand for wine products,
uh-huh.
And then just about that time, you'll start seeing some of this new capacity come online,
yeah.
Which will then accentuate this depressive cycle. So you'll have lower demand for wine generally,
and lower prices,
and then you'll have lower prices, and then you're going to have more supply. So. And then the pressures on those people who leverage themselves to create that capacity. And then you have fallout, which occurs in those who are too highly leveraged and will fall out of get cleaned out,
uh-huh.
Or those who are not strong enough to withstand that downward cycle.
Yeah.
And then you have some consolidation and reorganization, then you come back up again.
Huh.
And you do it all over again.
And so right now, like the big focus here is, the Pinot. Both Gris and Noir.
Yeah.
And then what about like other varietals? I mean, I keep hearing, Riesling is going to be the next big thing.
Well, there is pressure on that varietal as well. So Pinot Noir is the fastest growing red varietal in demand in America.
In America.
Mm-hmm. But it's on a small base, remember that. And then Pinot Grigio, has been the fastest growing white. And then Riesling, on a very, very small base, has grown very rapidly, but on a very small base. So those varieties are seeing a lot of growth and interest. So yes, I'm expecting to see, and we're planting more Riesling, certainly.
What kind of Riesling?
Well, it's a clone of Riesling that's been in Oregon ever since I started. And so it's a Riesling clone that's been here for over 30 years.
Is that right? Yeah. So how did you I know that you had kind of an interesting start in your with even like connections with Richard Sommer.
Well, I mean, it was.
So how did you start out in this wine business?
It was an unusual start because the first winemaker to come to Oregon following Prohibition was Richard Sommers. And he came to Roseburg. He came to the Umpqua Valley.
Right.
And he hired my dad to do his legal work for his winery.
Is that right?
And he gave my dad wine.
As payment?
Well, as No, I think it was more just, here's the wine I'm making. What do you think of it? Because it was obviously wine he'd made on a very small scale.
Uh-huh.
And my dad would bring it home, and I remember one time holding up a bottle of Richard's wine and saying, "Someday, grapevines will cover Oregon."
Whoa, how old are you
I was
here?
10 years old.
10 years old. I
Yeah.
mean, where does that come from? I mean, that's pretty...
Well, my dad was a big enthusiast, of Oregon. He really believed in Oregon's attributes.
Uh-huh.
And he was a small business attorney, and I think he really enjoyed working on that kind of groundbreaking project. I mean, having to learn about how to go through the legal maneuvers to get a license for a winery in Oregon, since no one had done it for so many years.
Yeah.
Probably was fun for him.
Yeah.
Exciting.
Well, but Hillcrest, I mean, it's number 44, I think, or...
Prior to Prohibition, there were wineries in Oregon.
Quite a few, and actually starting even with Britt down in...
Peter Britt.
Yeah.
So yes, I mean, but Hillcrest was the first winery since Prohibition, first commercial winery since Prohibition.
Uh-huh.
Richard was the first on the scene. Of course, it depends on how you can look at Corey and what Corey was doing up in, so it depends on how you look at the dates and who was doing what here. But without a doubt, Richard was very influential in getting the industry started.
So at 10, you're saying...
And my brother was 12, and so we tasted this wine, and we thought, wow, this is interesting.
With your parents' blessing? Or,
yeah,
or
yes,
behind
yeah. It was at the dinner table. And, and so my brother and I decided we'd make wine.
Oh.
And we started with the frozen...
You're 10?
Yes. And my brother and I started with the frozen Concord grape juice that was in the freezer. That Mom would buy for breakfast, and that's what we started to ferment. And that was our beginning.
Well, now where did you learn about fermentation? I mean, at 10, that's pretty sophisticated thinking.
Not really. I mean, it's not hard to ferment. Something that's got sugar in it, and so no, it wasn't that difficult. We both loved science, and we both had science. Every year we would compete in the OMSI science contest, the science competition, and actually for 4 years my brother won the OMSI award, and for 3 years I won. The OMSI.
Really?
So yeah, we were really into that, and so it wasn't really difficult to figure out how to do it. And then over time, we got a little bit better at it, and gravitated to using actual grapes, wine grapes.
That you got from Richard, or?
No, we just got them from home growers. There was quite a bit of home growing. There was still vines in Oregon. I mean, people, you probably don't realize that, but no. And on a small scale, and after a while, we got a little bit better at it.
Yeah. And so then, where'd you go? You started making this wine. Then you finished high school. You went to. So, how did you get into where you are right now?
Well, I got interested in Burgundy. I went to school at Oxford for a time. And my professors there loved Burgundies and introduced me to Burgundies. And so then I got to try some really nice wines, and that was fun. Professors at Oxford are a lot different than here. The teaching environment's a great deal different. It's very small. It's very collegial. It's you're with them not just during the day but in the evening. I mean, it's quite a different environment.
Right.
And so you learn a lot more about their lifestyle, and so that was a lot of fun. And so I learned a little bit about Burgundies doing that. But really what caused me to end up here was I was a very young lobbyist for the National Federation of Independent Business. And Richard and Scott Henry called me on the phone, and they were members. They were members of the association, and they said, we're working on legislation to help grow this wine industry, and we want to adopt legislation that would increase the research and promotional efforts for the industry. So I got involved as a very young lobbyist in helping get that legislation passed.
Yeah. Just out of curiosity, like, I assume that what was your degree in?
Well, I had no background in political science, so I had no background in viticulture or enology at that time. I later did take classes in viticulture at UC Davis, but not as a matriculated student, just in the programming that they offered.
Yeah.
And but I remember, it was years ago, Richard and Scott Henry would put on seminars.
Huh.
And would invite, that was a neat thing about what they did. The Castiles did it here. Ted and Terry and Marilyn and Pat would put on, seminars. And the ones that Scott and Richard put on were actually at their facilities, were at their vineyards. So they invited people to come and learn about grape growing. And that's how they got people kind of involved in the industry. And so
their motive was to kind of get more people involved.
Create
so
more interest and more people planting grapes and entering the industry. And I remember going down there. It was back in 1981, and I remember, Richard was so interesting because he'd chew on the. I remember he would chew on the buds that are on the cane. And he seemed to get some understanding of what may be ahead based upon doing that, and I've never quite understood that. So it was a little kind of eccentric, but he was also a great teacher, and he's a great guy. He's an absolutely fantastic fellow. But I remember he and Scott Henry putting on these seminars and going down there and learning from them. And the Castiles did the same thing in the shed at their vineyard. The tractor, where they kept the tractor. And we'd go there as young budding, growers. And this was in 1981.
And so you're a grower at that time then?
No.
So you're still doing.
I was a lobbyist. Yeah.
Lobbying.
And so I got excited and bought a tractor. And Joe Alexa was the administrator of the trade committee, the Joint Economic Development Trade Committee for the legislature. And you really can't pass the legislation like the wine growers wanted to pass without a foundation for doing that and a understanding on the part of lawmakers for doing that. So our first task was, how do we get lawmakers to understand this is real, that this is a real opportunity for Oregon?
Yeah.
So I worked with Joe Alexa he was the committee administrator and Joe essentially put together a white paper, an analysis of why the legislature should get behind this industry. And that was the first piece of the puzzle in order to get the rest of the lawmakers to say, yeah, this legislation makes sense. Because what was needed was we had to pass legislation that would increase the alcohol tax. And that meant that we were asking for a 2-cent increase in the alcohol tax from 65 cents to 67 cents.
To
help fund this new promotion and research effort. In addition, we were asking for $25 a ton as a grape tax, which is at that time the highest in the world. That growers were essentially imposing on themselves. Half to be borne by the grower, half to be borne by the winery if the fruit was purchased.
And let's see now, what year is that about?
Oh, that was back in 1983.
83.
I believe it was 1983. It was a long time ago. And that's when I first started this vineyard here.
So, keep going with this, and then.
So Joe, a lot of people don't realize how important Joe Alexa was in creating a foundation of legislative support for this industry. And Joe Alexa, has this little vineyard over here. Ankeny Vineyards. He grows grapes over here and makes wine. He makes great wine. But he was really fundamental, and it was his enthusiasm and his kind of dogged perseverance with his legislative committee that really got the lawmakers to, understand the importance of this industry. But he's, so that was just, that's, he's never been recognized for that, and he should be, at least.
How do you spell his last name?
Olexa, Olexa, Olexa. Alexa, and he owns Ankeny Vineyards. At one time, this was years ago, I remember he had Neil Goldsmith, who I think was mayor at the time. His brother was an investor in his vineyard.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah. So it's kind of really, of course, and Neil became very important to the growth of our industry.
Yeah.
But I'm talking about in the very early stages. So it was a lot of fun. I mean, we had Tom Mason, who was the Democrat legislature from the district around Portland University, as one of the sponsors of the bill. We had Werner Anderson, Andy Anderson, was who's passed away now, was my dentist, and he was from Roseburg, where I was raised, and he was the Republican legislator behind this measure. So we tried to create a little bipartisan effort, and it was very hard getting Republicans to support this measure, because increasing the tax on wine was increasing the tax on like Gallo and other winemakers from out of state.
Yeah.
And our bill actually exempted small producers. So we actually exempted ourselves from the tax. So this was not an easy task to accomplish. So anyway, it was quite a lot of fun getting that passed, and that was my first. So as I worked with Joe Alexa on researching the white paper to support the industry, for the legislature to come to an understanding of why they should spend their time and resources looking at and growing this industry. That's when I went. That's when Joe said, he'd gotten a little place to plant grapes. He says, Jim, you should do this too. And I was very excited about it. I thought, yes, this is what I wanted to do. So I bought a tractor, and I lived in an apartment up on the second floor.
And you had a tractor.
And I had a tractor, and I kept it at his place.
Good move.
Yeah, and I bought a tractor and all the equipment. That was the last year of the tax credit on equipment.
Oh, okay. I was going to wonder. It's like, okay, now why are you buying a tractor?
I didn't even have a vineyard. I think that was in 1980. When did I buy that? But I bought it before I actually had purchased this land. That was just how motivated I was to get going.
And had you started looking even for land?
Oh yes.
So
I spent 2 years looking for land. Yeah, I started right away looking for land.
Okay.
And at that time, remember there wasn't any cluster around Dundee, or what I mean. There was just a few growers here and there.
Right.
And so it wasn't unreasonable for Bill Fuller to be up near Forest Grove, for Richard to be down at in the Umpqua.
Yeah.
It wasn't unusual for these things to be spread all over the place, but I was looking for just that site that I felt would have those ideal characteristics. And
what were
this
your
happened to be
criteria?
it.
What were your criteria?
Well, I wanted to have the Jory soil at that time, and I think still today.
Now, Jory is like, there's some debate about what exactly Jory means and stuff right now among geologists and stuff like that. What are you looking for in that Jory soil?
Well, there wasn't a debate then. The Jory soil designation is a well-known soil designation, and the National Agricultural Service had soil maps that they've created over a number of years. So it was very easy for us at that time to go and look and see, okay, where is the land that has this designation? That designation, by the way, the Jory family is homesteaded just in the South Salem Hills, about 3 miles from here.
Is that right?
Yeah. So the name of the soil is named after the family that homesteaded just about 3 miles due west from here.
Wow.
And there's a cemetery of their family just a short distance from here. And of course, this is Oregon's most famous soil. And as a matter of fact, there was even an effort in the legislature to make it the state
soil. Excellent.
And of course, that didn't go anywhere. You know, but
State
but
nerd.
but there are soil scientists that love Jory soil. But what it is it's an ancient eroded volcanic origin that is high in iron and clay content.
Uh-huh.
And it has, even though it's well drained, it retains moisture, and so it's perfect for dry land farming. It's fairly deep at the lower parts of the slope, and then as it gets shallower, it's called Nekaya, Nekia, the Nekaya Association, and Nekaya is just a shallower version of Jory soil, so it's Jory/Nekaya. But that was but at that time, and I think there's still considerable support for Jory soil. It is a very depleted soil. So in other words, rainwater has percolated through it for millions of years. It's an ancient soil. It's not like the sedimentary soils that have been formed by the floods. And so it is a soil that is not high in nutrient.
Uh-huh.
And that is actually a benefit to high quality Pinot Noir production.
So that you don't have a lot of...
You don't have a lot of vigor. You don't have a lot of canopy growth. You don't have vegetative effects in your fruit. So it's really, and actually there's a place in Burgundy that has a soil type that's very similar to this.
I keep hearing that. Yeah.
And it's not common because most of Burgundy is soil types quite a bit different.
Uh-huh.
But there's a spot north of Beaune, just up the hill from Romany, this little village of Romany, where they have this red volcanic clay soil.
Huh.
And that is where Romany Conti's vineyard is planted.
Huh.
And I remember years ago Hugh Johnson writing in the Wine Encyclopedia that he felt that soil contributed to the satiny, perfumed nature of the Pinot Noir grown at that location. Well, here in Oregon, we have this by the hundreds of thousands of acres.
Right.
Whereas in Burgundy, they have this little treasure above Romany. And so soil, I think, is very, very important. The other things were elevation was very important to me. If you look at the maps of Burgundy, and you know how their classifications are, you can buy these maps. You see them in wine shops. You'll see where the classification of the first gross, the Grand Crus, the Premier Cru, and the village classification, you can buy different colors.
Uh-huh.
Well, if you look really closely at those maps, you'll see that there is an association with elevation.
Okay.
A great many of the Grand Cru vineyards share the approximate same elevation.
And what difference does that make?
Air density.
Air density, okay.
My feeling is that it's very possible that Pinot Noir is highly influenced by air density. Now, when you ride a ski lift up to the top of a mountain, and you look down, you can see how vegetation. You can just look visually at how vegetation responds to air density and elevation.
Uh-huh.
It's possible that Pinot Noir is doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Now, and others call it, the sweet spot on the slope. The Grand Cru vineyard is off the crown of the slope. You know what I mean? It's in that sweet spot on the slope.
Yeah.
That's how other people characterize it. But I think that there is a significant, the Grand Cru vineyards in Burgundy are at around 700 to 750 feet in elevation.
Okay.
And that's right where this slope is.
So this is at 750?
Yes, 750 feet is where mine.
Yeah.
And so that was a big factor for me.
Uh-huh.
Now, remember at that time, years ago, we were still kind of wandering around in the dark. You were willing to read tea leaves to try and pick the best site.
But what about climate? I mean, like the amount of rain that,
that's all obviously an influence too. And there are warmer and cooler sites in the Willamette Valley.
Uh-huh.
And the warmer sites are those that are in rain shadows, like the area down near Monroe that has got that green peak that shadows it. The area that Bill Fuller selected up near Forest Grove has got the Coast Range that creates a rain shadow there. So there are sites in the Willamette Valley where there are rain shadows and there are warmer spots. Absolutely. And in fact, as you get into this research, you'll find that that's true even in the Dundee area and other places where, there's some shadows that are occurring because of Chehalem Mountain, because of other things, and how weather patterns, how the northwest breezes during the growing season are influenced by this geographic layout. There is a wind speed upon which vines are adversely affected, and so
The vine or the fruit?
the vine, the leaf,
Okay.
the process of photosynthesis is affected by breeze, by wind speed.
That's
And
like dehydrating it, you mean, or how's it affect
it's hard to know exactly how it is. I don't know how it's influencing it. Probably a scientist, leaf scientist would know, but they do believe that there needs to be some shelter for. So even your microclimate of your vineyard would be influenced by even the kind of trees that might be bordering it or things like that. How it might lay in the land.
Yeah.
So air drainage, orientation to the sun, elevation, protection from the wind, all those factors determine, what might happen on your site.
Yeah. Yeah. And so again, like the criteria that you chose this area because of the soil type, the
Elevation, orientation to the sun.
To the south a little. You're to the south a little bit, to the west here.
Yeah, and then I had one other factor, and that was I wanted to make sure that I wasn't out in the middle of nowhere. I was somewhere where the public could see it and get to it, and that was a factor in my analysis. And so this spot right here, the South Salem Hills, is unique in that it's one of the few places where I-5 cuts through a viticultural area.
Yeah.
And there's an interchange on both sides of it, one up here and one down there, and it turned out to be just the an ideal place to build a winery.
And so, like you're obviously then you're thinking marketing, you're thinking, sales, you're thinking ahead about.
Yeah, it wasn't just one factor. It was, could we triangulate all of these factors into finding the ideal site? And you can see here, I mean, we sell 10,000 cases or more just out of our retail operation. From this location.
See, and that's a difference between you and a number of other winemakers. They were just looking for soil, or they were just looking for climate or whatever their criteria was, not thinking about like the marketing at all.
Well, eventually you have to think about
if you want to stay in business.
Yeah, and so that was one of because at that time when I first started, all the industry had were these fairly crude maps that were circulated at like visitor centers, which people could pick up and figure out, okay, how do they drive? And so the big industry project in the early stages was making a book that had road directions and little maps so people could figure out how to get to their location.
Yeah.
And that was one thing that I realized that, well, if it was visible, if it was convenient, there might be an opportunity to really grow the business. Now, that today is happening in a different way.
How do you mean?
There is business clusters forming. The classic.
You mean like the Dundee Association, like the Carlton?
Yeah. So it's the fast food phenomena. McDonald's is on one corner, Burger King's on the other, KFC's on the other corner. The clustering. Clustering creates a kind of a magnet.
Sure.
A business cluster.
Critical mass.
Yes.
Enough. So people say, okay, I can go there, and
yes.
There's more than one winery there.
Yes, and so that's the phenomenon that's occurring now. So the phenomena that when I first established this business was, we were all so far apart that to think ahead to making sure you serve the customer, you need to locate where you can be seen and be visited by the customer. Now, it's different. Now the way to do that is to cluster. But when I started, it was just a few of us. Now there's 150 wineries within 30-minute drive of Dundee.
Yeah.
And so that's why I'm in Carleton. So I understand that business clusters are forming, and that's going to become a very important one, and that's where we need to be.
Yeah. So when you project out to the future, like let's say, look out like, say 10 years from now, or 15 years, go through another business cycle. What do you see?
Well, I think Oregon's character will remain very much like it is.
And that's the character, like the
Small.
mom and pa kind of,
Small,
5,000
yeah,
cases.
small, independent, high quality. I do believe that is a enduring characteristic of the industry. I still continue to see the collaboration in the industry.
Between winemakers.
Yeah, which is uniquely Oregon. I think that's a very important distinction, is how collaborative and cooperative and how supportive people in the industry are to each other.
In terms of marketing, in terms of...
anything you can think of. Whether it's, the vineyards. I mean, when I first started, the Castiles, Bethel Heights,
Right.
they sold me grapevines on time. I made payments to buy those grapevines.
Wow.
And they never charged me interest. And that was Marilyn Webb. She was the business manager there.
Uh-huh.
And they were great vines too. I got Vadensville vines from them. They were really strong, really hardy, produced great fruit. And I would have never been able to plant that vineyard without them doing that.
Yeah.
And I got the Primard vines from Susan Sokolglasser.
Huh.
And she gave me a great price. And then she came down and helped me figure out how to plant and figure out how to lay out the vineyard.
Huh.
That's just an example of collaboration. The Oregon Pinot Camp, International Pinot Noir Celebration, those are institutional examples of cooperation. But, people are loaning you bins, they're loaning you equipment. I remember one time we blew the bladder out of our press, and we were right in the middle of harvest. And King Estate has the same press, same size type press. And they had the piece of equipment that we needed. And so we met in the middle of the night. And they actually ran without one of their presses to give us the equipment to continue to operate.
Wow.
But those are just little examples. I mean, you'll find hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of stories. But it all started, I think, with people like Ted and Terry Castile and Pat Dudley and Marilyn Webb, people like that, who put on these little seminars, who rewrote the Oregon Grape Growers Guide. The Castiles were fundamental in the rewrite and development of a good manual. I remember laying it on the ground next to the vine and looking at the picture, the drawing, and looking at the vine and figuring out, am I really doing the right thing? I don't think people really know that it was those kinds of contributions. It's like the unsung hero Joe Alexa, or the unrecognized, family of Bethel Heights, that created such fundamental and foundational tools or chapters in our history.
Yeah.
Now things, of course, get more attention as they go up. I mean, the Drew Ann's move to come to Oregon was a huge factor in increasing the awareness and sophistication of our industry, and then of course them bringing some additional clones in. Mm-hmm. No, there's a whole. I mean, good heavens, I could give you a whole.
Right. I mean, it's almost like a domino with Led, doing
Yeah,
his little
yeah.
thing there, and yeah. The guy that I still think is under recognized is Richard Sommer down in the Umpqua, because when I look at books and things like that, I don't see his name really mentioned.
He was obviously the fellow who really broke the ice.
Well, and they're doing a museum down there that I'm going to go to either tomorrow or day after. I can't remember which one it is. That has a lot of his.
But I think part of it has to do with geography. There's a lot of things that happen up in the Willamette Valley. There's a lot more people up here, And so I think that the story, you know, but I can tell you that if it hadn't have been for Richard, I wouldn't be sitting here talking to you,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yeah.
I
We'd
wouldn't
be talking about something else.
We wouldn't be here.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, it was Richard was fundamental or instrumental into the direction my life took. And I think that's true of many people. You know, part of it too is that his brand and his winery wasn't enduring. It wasn't. He struggled with his business through the years.
Yeah.
In large part because of scale and resources, and but you're right. He is way under-recognized.
Yeah. So I'm going to be talking with him. I think it's tomorrow. Really a nice guy. I really like him. Just on the phone.
He's a terrific guy.
Yeah.
He's an absolutely terrific guy. But there are other, you know, they're like Scott Henry too. I mean, Scott Henry, what a great guy, and always a business builder. You know, always someone who I remember in the early years, and he was the president of the Oregon Winegrowers Association, and helped, you know, put that together and helped organize people.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of interesting how you look at the industry now, and it's very heavily weighted to the north of Willamette, but really it's early leadership, and you know, had a lot to do with those guys.
Yeah, down in Untitled.
Yeah. Isn't that funny?
I can, yes and no. I mean, because like that population makes sense, and that kind of leads me to the next thing. It's like, you know, it's like you're like very business oriented, and I mean, you see like what needs to be done in terms of business. And how did you know, where does that come from? And then also like,
well, it's
you brought in investors.
It's a when you're making high quality Pinot Noir, and you're out there presenting yourself to your customer as making high quality Pinot Noir. It's not a characteristic you're really wearing around on your shirt sleeve.
Yeah.
I hope you know what I mean. It's not a moniker that I'd like to wear. But to be successful, you have to think about those things. But I was greatly benefited by the serving as the small business, the executive director of the Small Business Association, having interaction on all those issues that small business owners encounter, and learning from them. That was a big influence. And so I looked at, when you're growing grapes, you have to make sure you're sustainable. You're developing something that is sustainable, truly sustainable. And that's true of this business. And so you have to look at all the different things that you're doing to make sure it's truly sustainable.
Sustainable in terms of agriculture or in terms of business?
In terms of its life. Sustainable for its life, its economic life, its the life of it, so sustainable means a lot of things, but included even in our live, the fundamental principles of the low input viticulture analogy is that it's sustainable, that it's economically sustainable, that our practices have to be economically sustainable. You can't just go out there and not recognize that the economics have a role in your long-term success.
Yeah.
So, the area that I spent a lot of time on was, once working with the winemakers back in the very early 80s, passing legislation, I continued to do that. We had a problem with, the wine industry had a problem with siting wineries on agricultural land. And there was a famous court case in Jackson County on this issue, where the neighbor of a person who wanted to build a winery on his vineyard land, contested his right to, contested the building of that winery.
Because it was a commercial endeavor or something?
Yes, yes.
That was
yeah.
okay.
And I got all of that history. I haven't refreshed my memory. It's so old. But the problem is that the grape grower finally won his case, but it took so long and so much money. He was defeated. He was defeated. His money was exhausted. The time frame had gone past, and he didn't ever build the winery that he intended to build. So what I did was I worked by drafting legislation that would create a state policy that would make wineries on agricultural land a permitted use. That's just one example of. So there, I did a lot. Worked. So the area that I probably worked the most in was in public policy changes that improved the environment for the industry, to grow the industry. So that's the area that I enjoyed the most, and that's where I put my, my spare time.
Yeah. Now, where did the idea of getting investors? Where does that idea come from?
Well, necessity. The I worked my way through college in a sawmill, and the only resources I had were the jobs that I worked to buy the vineyard and plant the vineyard. And so, my dream was to build a world-class winery.
Yeah.
But that would take millions, and I didn't have that. And I thought also there was a great benefit from collective action, because I learned in school that in a project I worked at school at the University of Oregon, that collective action really had a lot of benefits.
You mean like just getting a number of brains together, a number of resources together, a number of people together that all had...
Consumers. Yeah, we started a little collective grocery store.
Oh, okay.
Student-owned grocery store.
Oh, okay.
University of Oregon. I saw that how consumer power, consumer involvement, if properly organized, could be a great benefit. So basically, I tied those things together. I thought, well, what an interesting business concept to organize wine enthusiasts, because I ran an association. And so it was very much like that. Those same kind of techniques and principles applied. So was it possible for me to organize a group of wine enthusiasts to help me build this winery?
Yeah.
And the challenge was discovering that wasn't legal. That the state law permitted only 10 unqualified investors a year, a maximum of 35. And an unqualified investor is an investor who's not a millionaire. And so, how many people did I know at that time? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if I wanted to organize hundreds of wine enthusiasts, they'd all have to be millionaires in order for me to even sell them $1,000 worth of shares, because that's the way the law worked. The law was designed to protect widows and orphans from promoters. And so you could only sell equity or an interest in a business, a security, to 10 unqualified investors a year and a maximum of 35. So my idea of organizing hundreds of wine enthusiasts to support the winery and build the winery wasn't possible. But then, as I was researching this, the securities folks at the department said, well, Jim, you could do a public offering.
Yeah.
But it was kind of a joke, because
Oh, okay.
who's ever done a public offering like that for a startup in an agricultural?
What year is that now?
That was in when they first told me that. It was like in the early mid-'80s.
Mid-'80s?
Yeah, and I spent 3 years studying and trying to figure out, well, how do I do a public offering? And so I did the first in the country. I did the first Regulation A self-underwritten public offering in the country, following the rules that were existed for this kind of thing.
First for a winery?
No.
First
self-underwritten public offering.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Huh.
It was very unusual.
Wow.
And I had a big help from a great guy Mark Dodson, who was an attorney, who was a partner in a very successful law firm in Portland, who really was intrigued by my idea. And he said, Jim, we've got the legal resources in our law firm to see if we can make this work. And it was Mark Dodson who was really instrumental in providing me his firm's legal resources to see if this was possible. And it turned out to be a huge project. and they spent, that law firm spent far more money than they ever got paid by me to get through that process. And we finally did. It took months. It took like 9-10 months to get through the process of actually registering to do this public offering. And then I had to go out and conduct it.
That's right.
And that was quite a chore too. And so, yeah, that was quite an experience. And so there's probably a reason why there's so few of them done in the country. They're hard to do. But we now are traded on the NASDAQ, and actually the company is traded on the principles of as public companies are, and we're providing a good return to our investor. We have a good multiple and a good earnings, and so we really did become that. We really were that thing that nobody thought would work, and we really did make it all the way up through to a traded stock at a proper value.
One of the things that does is it changes, or it's not changes your perspective, but it becomes, like you're very beholden to your shareholders. Like profit becomes to me it seems like a very important motive in all the decision-making process, because the shareholders are expecting a return.
Not really. Employees are expecting a job in the future.
Yeah.
Neighbors are expecting that the property is properly cared for. The community is looking for support for community needs. Everyone has a stake in the continued success of an enterprise.
Yeah.
Not just the investor, but everyone does.
Yeah.
Even the consumer. A business that's poorly managed and not properly investing in their business won't produce a safe product or a reliable product in the future. So everyone has a stake in the ongoing sustainable success of a business. And all that has to be balanced.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no one group that, is prioritized over the other. I'm certainly not influenced by, people who, are trying to figure out how to squeeze the last nickel of profit out of the company.
Yeah.
We let them know what our plan is. We fully disclose what our issues are, and they can choose whether or not to invest in the company. And so, no, I would say that is not the case here. We definitely want to run the company profitably, but that makes sense for everybody. If you don't run the company profitably, the employees may be at risk in the future for their benefits or their retirement or their jobs. So everyone has a stake in making sure the business is sustainable. Greed does come into play in public stocks, certainly. And you can see that in public companies that investment bankers, try and cause them to grow too fast, so they can ramp up the value of the stock. But what that does is that puts the companies at greater risk, because faster growth requires more investments in capital, which may not be sustained by sales, which can cause companies to fail. So greed can produce poor long-term decision making. That doesn't occur here. Nobody's trying to figure out how to get rich, off of. And that's. But we are running a company that is determined to perform responsibly for all parties: the employees, the community, our neighbors, other living creatures, and the investor.
Yeah. Getting back to the future of the industry, is like we kind of started to touch on it. You said that the character will remain the same.
Yeah. Which I think is a great character that exists today. Just to say it will remain the same. It's got a great character, and I think that will continue to be the case.
Yeah.
And it's partly economics. The Willamette Valley, which is the principal growing region in Oregon, and probably will be for at least some time, is such that our yields are low, our growing conditions are not easily mechanized. There's a lot of just fundamental economic reasons why our industry will remain fairly small.
Mm-hmm.
And large corporations will scratch their heads and worry about the risks of entering this, because we have less predictable weather conditions, we have less opportunities to mechanize, we have less opportunities for scale,
Mm-hmm.
and we have low yields.
Mm-hmm.
And all those things frustrate large corporations.
So what do you think the motive was for St. Michel, to come in?
I don't know. I think that clearly, nationally and probably to some degree internationally, Oregon Pinot Noir has taken its place among one of the finest wine growing regions in the world. And an organization as big as they are, that have investments, that they're creating, that represent those different areas, I can see why. Well, that's an arrow in their quiver that they'd like to have.
Yeah.
And it's an arrow. I mean, it's not like they came in here and bought 5,000 acres of land and so on.
Yeah.
They came in here and purchased a small winery.
But PERS is coming in and buying.
Well, that's not PERS. PERS is simply backed Dick Wallach and Bill Hill's property vineyard development business. And so that's not PERS that's doing that. It's just they're the investors. They're money behind what is being done.
Okay.
And I do think that Dick Wallach and Bill Hill have remarkable vision, because when they came in to do this, the conditions that exist today didn't exist. They had remarkable vision to really see the future, and they did. And then they're building this capacity in an extremely high quality way, which means that they're going to continue to produce high quality fruit from those sites and make great wine from that fruit.
Yeah.
So I think they're remarkably insightful. The question will be, how much capacity is there out there, and will they have any troubles in the future?
Consumption capacity.
For fruit, for that fruit at that price point, at that cost, because they're farming at a very high cost. So my only question is, and that's the uncertainty, maybe that's what their vision will prove again to me, that they really did see the future all the way through. But the uncertainty to me is, boy, that's a lot of investment. That's a very high cost, and how will they have buyers for all that fruit at that price point? That's really the only uncertainty that I see. But in terms of them making the move when they did, at doing it at the right time, they most certainly did. I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, Dick Wallach and Bill Hill are really good at what they're doing. Jack Irvine, I don't know if you've seen or heard of his he made a presentation at the Oregon Wine Board recently. Jack Irvine is the accountant that does like 60 vineyards and wineries books.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah.
Wow, what a perspective. What a perspective.
Yeah, he made an interesting presentation to the Oregon Wine Board, and he talks about how he doesn't think there's even enough capacity today, vineyard capacity today.
Huh. I hear that. It's like talking with other growers and investors. I hear that over and over, like from bankers, that when they look out to the future, there's more need.
Janis, I have heard this. I studied not only political science, I studied history. I love history.
Yeah.
And you always hear those things at the top of the cycle.
Well, that's what I keep thinking too.
You always hear them.
Yeah.
And very intelligent, very mature and wise people say those things at the top of the cycle.
Yeah.
At every top of every cycle. So I think that caution is in order.
Yeah. Well, it's a lot like the stock market or like any kind of.
I think caution is in order.
Yeah.
So I'm being cautious. I'm being very careful.
In what way now?
In how we grow, how we invest in our future, so that we do not leverage ourselves out there to become vulnerable.
Kind of one step at a time.
Because I've done that before. We did grow this business in the last spat of enthusiasm.
Now,
and
when
I got
was that?
way out there.
That was like it ended in the 80s, or
No, the last
82
push was in the well, it was 1995, 96. It's when we went to the last big push, which was what? About 10 years ago, right?
Yeah.
95, 96, 97?
So you think it's 10-year cycles?
Yeah, yeah. So that's what I'm seeing again, because back then, God, we got to buy land, we got to invest, and we did. We borrowed money, we bought, you know what I mean, and then things slowed down a bit, and we couldn't get all that volume sold when it needed to be at the price points it needed to be, and we accumulated way too much inventory relative to our sales growth. It was just too much enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Too much enthusiasm in sales projections produces too much capital investment in capital assets, and if it's leveraged, you got a problem.
Yeah.
And we did. So I really had a lot of, I even had personal health issues dealing with all of that pressure.
It's like it started to affect because like you were worried about it.
Yeah, hypertension. Yeah, it created. It creates lots of problems in business when you've got a banker sitting on your shoulder wondering, why are you out of compliance on your loan covenants? And people don't understand that when they think, gee, if they make their house payments, nobody's going to take their house away from them. Well, that's true, but people understand in business that you can make every payment to a banker, but if you're out of compliance with your loan covenants, they can take your business.
Mm-hmm.
People don't understand that. They think this out of compliance with loan covenants. What's that? Right? They don't realize that the banker can walk in and take those keys from you.
Yeah.
And we were out of compliance with loan covenants for years, following our last big spurt of growth.
And so it's going in to see the president and making your case.
Yeah. So you've got that banker standing on your toes,
Yeah.
on your fingers, going, "Hey, you're out of compliance with these loan covenants. What are you going to do about it?"
Yeah.
And we had to scramble to add more capital to our company. I did sale leasebacks and sold stock, and I did a lot of things to figure out how to change the capital structure of the company to reduce the bank's presence in our business. It was grueling.
What was the biggest success that like a moment maybe that was just euphoric for you? You just said, yes.
We get those all the time.
Do you?
Yeah, we get those all the time.
What was the one that comes to mind first?
I'm telling you, I suppose it would, there's so many of them. It's securing the property. I secured this property in a bid. There was a blind.
It was a bid.
Blind bidding process. Yeah.
Wow, that's interesting.
And that was just so securing the property after all that time of hunting for it, and then having to bid in a blind, in a competitive blind bid. That was. But we've had so many of these. It's hard to say. Sometimes it's the simplest things. Sometimes it's how the fruit looks when it comes in. Sometimes it's how the wine is developing the barrel. There's so many of them. It's the graduation of one of my employees' children from high school or college. It's the birth of their child. It's good heavens, and there's so many of them every day. Life is a blessing, and there's so many blessings we have. So it's hard to say.
Yeah. You mentioned when you were out of compliance. If I was to ask you, it's like, what was the biggest hardship or the biggest downer, while you were doing this business? What would that be?
Well, it would be these kind of. It's never. Believe it or not, it's never really been the weather or because those things you just accept. I mean, you can't change them.
Yeah.
You know, those are things that are beyond our control.
And you already know that, I mean, when you moved here to the Willamette Valley, you already knew that that was a possibility, like rain through harvest.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so those are things that, you know, I never worry about or lose sleep over. Never. But the things that, where my performance could be better, and my performance, had it been better, would have produced a better outcome. Those are the things that you do.
So like you're being self-critical or self-examining.
That's the area those are the ones that are probably the hardest to deal with.
Yeah.
You know, where, you know, how you could have performed better, been more insightful, been firmer. You know, those are the areas that.
Did any particular thing come to mind?
Oh, I got a few of them.
Do you?
Yeah. And really, it's all back to, you know, how can you know, be a better leader? You know, how can you be a better person? I mean, that's really the, you know, facing, you know, what your shortcomings and figuring out how to improve upon yourself. Those are the things that you really, probably the only things that are disheartening.
Disheartening. So you're hard on yourself then.
Well, I think all leaders are self-critical. I mean, how do they become better leaders?
Yeah. Got to look at my list of questions here. Let me ask you too, is like, this is just a big, broad question, because like what I'm doing with this book is, I'm supposed to be the writer, but what I'm actually going to do is like all the people, I'm interviewing lots of people.
I know, it's great.
And getting some incredible stuff. I was in with the Letts yesterday, and the two of them had discussions.
Jason or
Jason
Jason
and
his dad?
David,
Yeah.
had discussions in front of my microphone that they've never had before.
Yeah.
It was phenomenal. I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, good for you.
And so what I'm going to do, you know, without invading people's privacy, is I'm just going to take the nuggets.
Yes.
And then kind of create like stories with these nuggets. You know, it's like I'm going to deal with people, going to deal with the history, going to deal with climate geology and all that sort of thing. But it's going to be coming from people like yourself, all the stories.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think it's great. I think what you're doing is fantastic. And that's actually what I'm working on as well is very similar. I wanted a very humanistic, I wanted to have us tell the story in a way that really it needed to be told, and nobody has done that before properly. A lot of this work is just picture books. They're not really, and I wanted to make sure that we were true to the variety and the technical information was accurate and thorough, so that it would do the industry justice. That's really what needs to be done.
Yeah. You know, it's kind of interesting. Now, I have to say that I was really disappointed that we couldn't, work together, because the goals are really, really similar.
I don't know why we couldn't.
But my vision is like, I want to look at all of Oregon. Like Seven Hills Vineyard out there is incredible, and what the guys out there are doing are incredible.
Yeah.
I was up, that old Zinn in the gorge.
Yeah.
It's incredible what, and so I want to look at all those things. I think Pinot is like really important, but I'm also looking at cycles. Like maybe in 10 years, a new movie comes out, and Riesling is the hero. And,
no, you're right. Actually, you're right about that.
And I'm trying to create a classic, something that
actually in 100 years, maybe the center of gravity in Oregon won't even be in the Willamette Valley.
You mean in terms of population and that sort of thing?
No, in terms of the industry.
Of the wine industry?
Yeah.
And why do you say that?
Because of climate.
Because of the global warming situation, you mean? Or?
The wine palette is focused on varieties that we don't grow very much of in the Willamette Valley.
And you're thinking like which?
And those are warmer climate warmer climate varieties.
Like,
Cabernet, Syrah, Merlot.
and, like those are like the classics. This is just like, I'm not a wine expert at all, and I'm fairly new to observing all this stuff. But those seem like they're the classics that have been around for a long time, And I'm wondering, I look out to the future, and I think, what are people going to want, in the future? Are they going to be a little bit more adventuresome, or kind of stay with the classics and
It's really hard to know those. I mean, it's hard to predict those. But I do think that the Willamette Valley grows wine in a variety and a style that is in a very narrow part of the palate. And Southern Oregon and Eastern Oregon have climates and growing conditions that serve a much bigger part of the palate. So in 100 years, the Willamette Valley might be a little Burgundy, and the rest of Oregon might be really where the action is,
Mm-hmm.
economic and the industry growth. So, and that's because we occupy such a small part of the American wine palate, what we grow here.
Yeah.
So it's very possible center of gravity will change. The reason why I have a focus on Pinot Noir is because I feel that in order to be successful in telling a story, you need to be focused.
Uh-huh.
That's why I took that focus.
Yeah.
That's why I'm doing that.
Yeah.
But I do love Oregon. I'm an Oregonian first.
Mm-hmm.
And I do believe that the Oregon story needs to be told effectively.
Yeah.
So I don't want you to feel in any way that I don't think what you're doing is great.
Yeah.
What you're doing is great.
Well, it's a book that I've wanted to do actually for quite a while, and I'm just jazzed about it. I mean, like, what I'm getting paid for this is like 10 cents an hour.
Oh, I know that. No, I
deal,
understand.
And
I'm with you. I'm right
and
there with you.
I'm doing, like, I work a lot on my commercial stuff just so I can take 4 days off
Yeah.
to go to Southern Oregon.
Yeah.
So, yeah. And that's why, again, it's like, like, I appreciated, like when you bought like all those copies of the Pacific Northwest Winery book, because I thought that was actually, for what it is, it's
great.
really a good book.
Absolutely.
It's really a good book.
Absolutely.
And it's been really received really positively.
Mhm.
And so, like, I want to kind of build on that with this book, and that's why I was really kind of hoping that somehow we could synergize or somehow work together and originally, like, when I was kind of thinking about it, when talking about it with Shelby and stuff like that, I didn't know, what it was. And the focuses are a little bit different too, because it seems like you want to use, like, the book almost like a marketing tool.
No, not really. No, not really.
Uh-huh.
Not as a marketing tool for this company,
Uh-huh.
but in order for us to be effective, we need to be focused. That's how we've looked at it.
Yeah.
We want to go out and tell the story of Oregon Pinot Noir. That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah.
I wanted to create something that was so technically sound that it could be used by the Oregon Pinot Camp as a staple of its publications.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the level of quality I want to see in the publication.
Yeah.
So, but yes, I mean, we do have a motivation to project the variety, and as a consequence, project our brand.
Right.
Yeah.
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 But that's a byproduct of our success. Hopefully,
Yeah.
will be a byproduct of our success.
I can't, Clive, the Swedish guys, it's like, they bought a bunch of photographs. They needed photographic help with their book, and so they contacted me and bought a bunch of photographs and stuff like that. I was trying to understand, like, what market they were going after with their book, because it seemed like Clive was trying to make it kind of a technical book, too. And I don't know where he finally ended up. He should be finished with a mock-up by now. So I'm kind of curious as to, like, what he ended up, with. 'Cause I only saw it in fairly early stages while he was here.
Yeah.
Do you have any sense?
No, I don't. I'm not. I have been away from the business. I went on vacation and I So I don't know where these things stand.
Yeah. I'm kind of curious. I'm thinking like too is like the marketing of this book. Like when it comes out, it's like I don't like competition for books when they're released at the same time.
Yeah.
So,
I'll tell you what, we will. If there's one thing that we do, we know how to get out the story. We are very, very aggressive marketeers.
Yeah.
And
see, and that's why, like, I'm a real marketer too, but I don't have your resources to be able to to do that. And so, like, I almost feel like if these two books come out at the same time, it's like I'm almost kind of thinking, oh, shoot, I'm just looking at it from my point of view. It's like that's like competition, and I feel a little bit like David and Goliath.
Well, like I said, I'd be happy to work with you.
Uh-huh.
I would be happy to work with you. But it seems like you're on a little bit different track. You've got a publisher. You've got a time schedule that's different than ours.
Mm-hmm. Well, don't you isn't your goal to get it out by 2000? What's next year? 2008.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
By what was it, November or something like
yes.
that?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's like I'm hoping.
And it would go into the spring catalogs for 09 though. That's when the spring catalogs get published or circulated by the publishers.
Uh-huh.
So, but we wanted to have an early, we wanted to have those books in our hands, so we could go out and seed the market. Because I'm planning on giving away about 5,000 books, giving them away.
See, that's fantastic. I mean,
giving them away,
yeah.
and so that is going to create awareness and demand, and buzz in advance of the publishers coming out with their and in advance of the reviews.
Yeah.
So this is kind of all part of a strategy to be very impactful.
Yeah.
So, and we don't have a profit motive.
Yeah.
Well, there's no profit motive here.
Yeah.
So that gives you even a lot more flexibility of what we can do.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're in a very, in the publishing world, in a very enviable, kind of a position.
Mm-hmm. And like I said, I'd be happy to work with you.
Yeah.
And like if with photography as well as your research,
Mm-hmm.
absolutely.
Yeah.
I'd love to include that. Love it.
How could we do that?
I do think that the long-term marketability of a book that is focused on a variety is much stronger.
Uh-huh.
I'll tell you that. The Pinot Noir story has a great market potential. The Oregon story doesn't. There's lots of Oregon books.
I see. Yeah, that makes sense.
The Pinot Noir, there's the last book on Pinot Noir is sold 50,000 copies or something, or more than that, 250,000 copies. I'll have to get the research on it.
Uh-huh.
And it's really not that good a book.
Now,
it's a good book. I'm sorry for saying that.
I didn't even know that there was one. I know there's one on Chard and there's one on what is it, Cab?
Now we have done some research on this.
Okay.
We've done some research.
Who did the?
I can dig it out for you.
Okay, yeah,
and
I'm
show
kind of
you.
curious because
But if you look at, it's called American Pinot Noir.
Oh, it's American.
Yeah, and it's a book that is.
Wow.
It's a hard copy, a hardbound book. Got a lot of just print pages and a few images, just a few images. But because it was the only book available, he sold a boatload of copies of this thing. And he's now in his third reprint or something. But there's very few images. It's pretty dry reading, but it actually is good. I don't want you to think I'm criticizing the author. I'm not.
Yeah.
And it's a remarkable achievement to sell that many books.
Yeah.
But what I wanted to do was I wanted to narrow that story down from American to Oregon, keep it varietally specific, and then give it the images and the quality that the people got it and just went, wow.
Yeah.
Wow. They get this and they go, ooh, you got to be kidding me. Look at this thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but I wanted to narrow that story from American to Oregon and tell the Oregon story about Pinot Noir. Now, Now, if you were to say, well, Jim, what order would you like to do these in? I'd do the Pinot Noir story first, and then I'd do the Oregon story second.
Why is that? What's the thought process there?
Because it gives me I have a narrower focus that I can act on when the market is sensitive to Pinot Noir issues. The market right now is riding high on Pinot Noir.
Yep.
And then and then capitalize on that, telling that story very well, and then expand the story to a regional focus. And that's probably the pathway I'd follow.
Well, and there's a certain amount of logic to
because the timing for Pinot Noir as a variety is a very high demand right now.
Right.
That's what the public's interested in reading about.
Yeah.
Really. And so I've got to hit my timetable to make sure that I capitalize on Pinot Noir as the title.
Yeah.
We'll do 30 times more publications with a title that includes Pinot Noir than a title that just is Oregon wine.
Yeah.
20, 30 times better. So I've got to do that anyway. That's just my sense of the market.
Yeah.
But a story that's narrowly defined also has more power and will penetrate the consciousness more effectively. And I mean consciousness of publishers, reviewers, and the public. So anyway, that's my...
Yeah. Well, and what you say makes a lot of sense. And I guess I hadn't...
Now, I'll tell you what. I'd work with you on that. On the Pinot, telling that Pinot Noir story. Love to work with you on that.
On that segment of the Oregon book, or
of what I'm doing.
Hmm.
I mean, I'd love to collaborate with you on that.
Yeah.
With your photography as well as your research. Love to.
Well, you've got Aaron. I don't want to be stepping on Aaron's toes. I mean, guy, I like him.
The more the merrier.
Yeah.
The more the merrier.
Yeah.
The better the quality of the product, the better. How would we step on his toes?
I don't want him to feel.
He has no emotional or psychological commitment, or you know what I mean. I mean, he's excited to be doing the job. I mean, I think he was excited to learn of what you'd done. You know what I mean? So it's not like he's not. This is not a selfish endeavor for him.
Yeah. Okay.
The better. One of the things I was thinking about is that there's not just one photographer. There's other photographers that have done work in Oregon that have been quite good. And part of the story about Pinot Noir is the photographers. And I've talked to my staff about including telling their stories in the book. Because it's just like what you said, you're making 10 cents an hour. Why are you doing this? You have a passion for Pinot Noir, and you have a passion for Oregon. And so I wanted to also communicate, tell that story. Who are these passionate people that are telling this story?
Yeah.
So I actually want to tell a story about the writers, the photographers, and key consumers, key leaders, like Sue Horstman. Sue Horstman is another one of these unsung heroes who has been one of the most important people in our industry.
Yeah.
She deserves to have her story told.
Yeah.
So this is not a book about vineyards and grape clusters and the people who make the wine. It's a book about people who are passionate about Pinot Noir and have created this, this story.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I have a different twist probably maybe than you were thinking.
Well, yes and no. What I was looking for, and again, it's like because my subject is quite a bit broader. I mean, I'm looking at Sommers, who's planting, and I'm looking at Scott Henry, who's not just planting, one variety and stuff like that. I'm going to Southern Oregon to revisit some.
But here's the thing, though, in the telling of the Pinot Noir story, Richard and Scott were critical.
Absolutely.
In the development of that story, and they're going to be a part of this story. We're going to tell. So just because they're down there doesn't mean, because they were foundational into building this industry, which created this opportunity for us to project Pinot Noir from Oregon. Besides, Scott Henry makes a beautiful Pinot Noir. and has for years.
I've never had.
Oh, it's gorgeous, wonderful Pinot Noir.
Yeah.
And Richard has made some great Pinot Noirs in his time.
Yeah.
So, just because they're in the Umpqua Valley doesn't mean they don't make great Pinot Noir. They do.
Yeah. Well, that's an interesting area down there. You know, in terms of climate, in terms of a lot of a lot of factors.
Oh,
yeah. Yeah. So.
But anyway, so I have a marketing, I think a market timing issue why I think it needs to be narrowly focused, and I believe that we'll have a lot more success telling that story that way.
Mm-hmm. See,
so
my approach to this is to make it a human story, and
ours as well.
And because like that's who made the industry. And that's why, like, I was just ecstatic when the Letts were, Jason was sharing with his dad, and before that, I had just David, and he was sharing with me like stuff about, like how proud he was about, his son and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And they were sharing, like Jason was sharing things that he had never told his dad before, and I thought, my God, they're doing this in front of a microphone.
Yeah.
I mean, this is pretty amazing stuff.
It is, and that's why I don't want it just to be a picture book.
Yeah.
Because you need the content to make sure that is properly told, and it is given a context that is sufficient enough for that story to be properly told.
Yeah.
It can't just be, lines underneath a photograph.
Well, it's like my approach is like my captions are going to have a lot of technical, information. There's going to be a lot of information in the captions about like variety, soil types, why, all those kinds of things in the captions, and that way it's like I used to shoot for Geographic. And so,
and that's what we want it to look like. Actually, we want our book to look like a National Geographic.
And I know that most of the people that look at Geographic look at the pictures.
Yeah.
And then they read the captions.
Oh yes, no, you're right.
Then
you're exactly
if
right.
They are intrigued, then they'll start reading the copy. And sometimes get past the first 4 paragraphs.
You're exactly correct.
So
you are exactly correct.
And so that's how.
I don't disagree with you in any way, anything you're saying.
And that's the approach that I'm trying to take in this book. It's like these photographs, have to be really compelling, and there has to be some really knockout, beautiful photographs in there
absolutely.
too. Like I just got some incredible stuff out in the Walla Walla area.
So what is preventing you from working with us on?
Nothing, actually. I'm trying to figure out how to make it work, because it's like I want this Oregon book to be successful because I'm kind of emotionally. Wrapped up in it, just because like I've wanted to do it for so long, and maybe I've got tunnel vision.
Well, no. Let's do this then. Why couldn't we do companion books?
That maybe is a really good idea.
Why couldn't we do 2 of them? And market them as companions?
That might be a really good idea.
We have the Pinot Noir story, and then we have the Oregon story.
Yeah.
And they're actually companions.
So that they look similar, the look is similar, the feel is similar, and stuff.
And they're marketed as companions.
Yeah. I think that would be a really good idea. Yeah. I could go for that. Yeah.
It'd be a great idea.
Yeah. I could go for that.
And they'd have a branding, they'd have a look, feel. There would be some crossover in content, certainly.
Yeah.
And we'd actually package them as companions.
That's really a neat idea.
We could market them. They could be also marketed independently, but also packaged as companions.
Yeah. I did for brown trout. I did a series of calendars for Costco of Canada, and here are the 3 calendars that Costco wanted, and I thought it was pretty interesting. Like they wanted an engagement calendar, they wanted a mini calendar, and then a traditional large, and this is all one package that they sell as one package.
Now, here's the thing I wanted to ask you, though. This is what's important to us, and this, I guess I need to find out from you. Are you comfortable including other photographers?
Yeah.
Because that's important. This has to be about our subject, not about our egos.
Yeah, yeah.
Now, on the other hand, I want to tell the story of our photographers. In a way, you're probably not accustomed to having a story been told about you.
Oh, I do a lot of marketing, so I get on TV a lot and stuff
But
like
because my feeling is the passion for Pinot Noir has been driven in part by our photographers, by these very creative people like yourself who have gone out and done these kind of things.
that. Yeah.
And I think that's a story that needs to be told. That's part of the story.
I don't know. I'll take a Richard Sommer position on that.
That's why hardly anybody knows him.
Yeah.
Is because he's been too modest.
Yeah.
Way too much. This is beautiful. Richard has been way too behind the scenes.
Yeah.
And the guys who are out there pounding their chests are the ones that everybody remembers as thinking, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And, God, that is beautiful. Where's this? Oh, here it is.
Yeah, I finally, like I was doing calendars with another company and they
How'd you
wouldn't put
do
captions
this?
on there. And finally now I insist on captions.
Yeah.
So, wineries vineyards get credit.
Yeah, good for you. Well, if you're willing to work with others, to have other photography, but have still a very important and big role. I'm not saying your role be diminished, but just so that, because I do believe it's going to take other photographers to produce something that people just go, these guys they've uncovered every rock.
Mm-hmm.
But the other part of it too is that I want to make sure that a lot of people have a stake in it.
I know that one.
I want people to say they've treated the subject fairly.
Yeah.
And part of emotionally how people feel they've treated the subject fairly is that they've been included in it properly.
Right.
And that creates a broad-based support, so that when we go out and present these books, people are saying, the industry's saying, yeah, nice job.
Yeah.
And it's not just in the industry, it's other photographers, it's whomever
Yeah.
that is influential. But I would love to work with you. We could easily do companion. We certainly have the resources to do it, and I have the ambition to do it, just
Yeah.
like you do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've got all kinds of ideas of how we can get the word out and develop it.
Well,
And I believe as much in the Oregon story. I'm from Roseburg, you know that. I make wine from the Southern Oregon.
oh, is that right? Oh, that's right. That's right. That's right.
There's a great story. Don and Trouty Moore are some of the most wonderful people you'll ever meet in your life. They own, the Griffin Creek Vineyard,
Mm-hmm.
and Quail Run Vineyard, and they have an amazing story to tell, and they just genuine, remarkably intelligent pioneers in Southern Oregon, and they deserve. When we tell the Oregon story, they're a part of that Southern Oregon story, a big part of that Southern Oregon story. So yeah, and that story needs to be told, absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm not saying that shouldn't be.
Yeah.
So would you be interested in doing something like this?
I'd be interested. Yes. I'm very interested in that because, like, what I'd like.
But how does this influence your relationship with your publisher? Because we haven't chosen one yet. We want to choose a publisher that's going to move the ball furthest down the field.
Yeah. To be honest, I haven't even signed a contract with them. It's like I spent 3 months negotiating contracts.
Okay.
And it would feel a little bit awkward, like pulling back, from them.
You could let them know that you have a partner who would like you to go back and kind of reassess.
Yeah.
You could say that.
Who are you looking at as a publisher?
We will select a publisher that is going to give us the broadest national appeal, especially with reviewers. So it might be 10 Speed, it might be whomever that is going to give us that.
Yeah.
Give us that real imprimatur. Because we want the New York Times reviewer to review this book and publish the review in the New York Times.
Yeah.
And we're going to select a publisher that's going to get us there. And a small 2-bit publisher is not going to get us there.
Yeah. I can't say I'm an expert with publishers, like Chronicle is like, I think they're the biggest on the West Coast.
What I'll do is we'll most likely engage a very experienced book packager and pay a very experienced book packager a fee to help us go through the process of vetting out all the publishing options and exploring
That's
each one of
probably
them.
that's a really a good idea.
And we do know of some really good, well-accomplished packagers.
Okay, and if you need some more names, I have some too.
Oh, no, but I mean, if we were to collaborate and do this, we'd obviously be working with you closely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But I love the idea of doing companions.
Yeah.
I just never imagined that I would have the scope to do it. It never got into my mind until you'd already begun to think through how to do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love telling the Oregon story. That's what I am. I'm like the Oregon Chamber of Commerce when it comes to wine.
Uh-huh.
You know, I was over at the Oregon Restaurant Association speaking to them at their annual conference about Oregon wine, and I served not just Pinot Noir, but I served I had a Syrah on their table from Southern Oregon. I'm giving the toast at the annual Democratic Convention in Sun River this next weekend. And I'm going to do it with wines from Southern Oregon as well. So, you know, I don't want you to think that I'm just. The reason why I've selected Pinot Noir is because I believe I have there's a very strong market timing reason to tell that story now.
And that makes perfect sense. It absolutely makes perfect sense.
The next story that should be told is Walla Walla Syrah. Has anybody done any books on Walla Walla Syrah yet?
No.
Well, let me tell you, I'd be happy to help you with that one.
And I'd be happy to do that, because that's an incredible area.
There's a balloon there, and all somebody needs to do is stick a pin in it.
Yeah.
And
this is a great time. It's like they're like in the upswing.
This is perfect time to do a story, to do a picture book. I mean, to do a nice story on Syrah, Walla Walla Syrah. There'd be a lot of market demand for that.
Yeah.
But not so much as what I'm talking about. If we do the right kind of story on Pinot Noir and tell the right kind of story, we're talking about significant. Now, what are your economic goals from the work you're doing?
The book is like a portfolio piece for me. It's not a financial gain. And so then what I do is like I take the photographs that I get from it, and they end up in calendars. They end up in Wine Spectator. They end up in.
Well, let me make sure if you want to progress in hammering out an agreement, make sure you let me know. Okay, Jim, here's what I'm contributing. Here's what I want to get from this contribution. Here's the role I want in decision making. Here is here's the look and feel of how I want to be presented. Make sure that each one of those things is carefully defined, so that we can quickly come to a plan.
Okay.
And I'll do everything I can to be as respectful and cooperative, and because the goal is to be very successful in telling the story. And that'll be the measure that will be applied to everything we do.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's my goal too. You know,
I know it is.
Like I say, it's like I want.
So when will I hear from you again?
Oh man, the next opening that I have for time actually is like toward the end of this coming month.
Okay.
It's like I'm booked. I mean, I'm
well, think about, and on the road or whatever, think about these things.
Yeah.
But I tell you what, I'm totally open to doing this. We definitely have the resources and the organization to really put the pedal to the metal.
Yeah.
And if we need more writers, if I need more researchers, if I need better research, if I need illustrators, whatever.
But I think though, like the research. To me, like one of the keys, I think, are the interviews, and I think it's important that the interviewers are the kind of people. I do a project like that I'm doing. Like I've gone to Africa to really remote tribes, and I interview people about their myths and their archetypal dreams. And I'm the only person that's ever, the tribes I've visited, I'm the only person that's ever recorded those things. And my conjecture is that those stories are probably the stories that Christianity is based on, Islam is based on, our contemporary Judaism is based on, our contemporary religions are based on those stories. That's a theory that I have. And like the interviewing process is extremely important. And when I hire an interpreter, the guy has to be humble. That's the first thing that I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Is the guy has to be humble. And I don't care if he, his language isn't, like so you can translate to one of the languages that I speak. If it's a little rough, that's okay. But if he's humble, then
How would you like to? Are you saying that we need to acquire more interviewers?
I don't know that. I think that the interview process for what you're looking for, I think, is really an important process.
When do you want to sit down with Aaron to discuss that?
Let me think about it. I've got a 3-hour or 2.5 hour drive. Let me think about it a little.
One thing we are doing is we're not only, by the way, trying to write a book, but we're also collecting all this information for the Oregon Wine Board for its archive.
And that's a great idea.
So what our research will do is serve as a foundation for the industry's archive.
Yeah.
And then eventually I'll go out and raise money to strengthen that, to add more resources to building a true historical record of the industry.
Yeah, yeah.
So this is just
Now, you know
part
what,
of that.
like Douglas County, the museum has done.
Yeah.
Yeah. I want to go, I've got one more thing. I can't remember if it's tomorrow or sometime. Yeah, what time is it?
It's almost 11.
Okay.
You got to get going.
I budgeted until 11 o'clock so.
Okay. Well, I'll tell you what, we accomplished a lot here today, I think, is because I'm very open to working with you.
Yeah.
As long as, and I do believe we could probably put something together. And I think a companion strategy is a very clever strategy.
I think that is a good strategy, actually.
Because who's done something like that? It's also it also creates a uniqueness, right?
Yeah.
There's a Pinot Noir story, and then there's this broader Oregon story.
Yeah.
And I think it will. I think that doing that as companions will intrigue people and intrigue reviewers. They go, this is very intriguing. This is very interesting.
Yeah.
Here they've really focused in, dialed in, created something that's very usable and focused on a variety, and then they've gone and told the broader story.
I think, though, that we need to be really careful in how the whole thing is put together, so that there's not a lot of duplication. And
the duplication there would be linkages. In other words, you might tell a story that would take 3 or 4 typewritten pages in the focused book, but you may only have 3 or 4 paragraphs of the same kind of material in the broader story.
Like when you visualize like the Pinot book, it's like how much white space are you visualizing? And what's the ratio of text to visuals to white space?
Maybe text would be around 60%, visuals 40%. Something like that.
Yeah. See, like this book that like I envisioned was more there'd be some pages where there might be just photos with heavy duty captions, and then the paragraphs could be in quite a bit of white. It's like I'll probably pull from this interview here.
Yeah,
I'll probably pull like 2 or 3 maybe things, or one thing is like when I'm working on a theme of like climate or something, or terroir or something. It's like I'll pull out something here, and there'll be maybe even like Jim's little contribution and Dick Ponzi's thoughts about that. Maybe even contrasting those two.
Yes. Yeah.
And so not such heavy. It's not a written kind of a book. It's more of a book.
There's nothing wrong with having stylistic differences between these companion books.
I think that would actually be advantageous. To do that.
Yeah. Because what had happened is the reviewer that wanted more content would be satisfied by the one.
Exactly.
And the reviewer that wanted more of this kind of this visual impact, kind of
It's
impact.
not just visual, it's also like the poetry of
No,
life.
I'm with you. I know, but I meant, someone who wanted to have something that was thematically different. You'd be able to say, well, you'd satisfy this person over here who really wanted to have that technical information, and you'd also satisfy this person over here who wanted to see it presented in a different way.
Yeah.
So I think there's benefits to that.
Okay.
And I think it creates credibility to tell the story in those ways.
Yeah.
One a visually poetic way, and another one would be a technical manner.
But again, it's like I'm not saying that I'm not going to. I want to cover geology because it's so important.
Yeah. And
here.
the illustrators who will create this illustration material could do both. There's no
Okay.
reason why you couldn't, right? You
Yeah.
couldn't have pieces of both of those working.
But it sounds like you want to probably go in the Pinot book in more in depth
Oh yes.
than I was envisioning it.
Oh yeah.
Mine would be covered in captions, and then like the stories from Chris Bannock out in Seven Hills, and somebody in Southern Oregon, and somebody here from the Willamette.
Sure.
Talking about.
I'll tell you what. Think more about this, but I actually think we have a brainstorm.
Okay.
And the brainstorm is that they could be companions.
Yeah,
But,
I do like that idea.
But not identical. They
Yeah.
would be complementary
Yeah.
companions.
Yeah.
But have the same kind of look, feel, that would create kind of a branded concept that they are companions.
Yeah. And I need to actually kind of make a decision here pretty soon, because like I don't want to leave graphic arts like up in the air. 'Cause I mean,
Okay,
yeah.
I
So
understand.
yeah. All right. I need to take a couple of half snaps of you.
Somewhat.
Photographs.
Okay.
I call them half snaps
Okay.
because I don't take it too seriously.